Hi guys, hi everyone. Oh, this is exciting. We're already at 50 people in like a fraction of a second. Awesome. Hi guys. Maybe we should start with that uplifting video.
You ready?
Let's do it. Hi, welcome everybody. Welcome. Gever, if we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So hi guys, welcome to the Learning Jam presented by Toddle. We're super excited to be doing something like this in the very beginning of 2020. It's a great way to start the year. My name is Shraddha, and like most of you here today with us, I am also an educator. I'm extremely passionate about teacher education and how technology can be used to innovate and amplify the impact. And currently I'm working at Toddle, and I work extensively with the kind of lifelong learning opportunities we provide our audience like you. As we wait for others to join, we'd love to know where you're joining us from. So please put your name as well as where you're joining us from in the chat box. And I'm sure Gever would also love to know who's in the audience today. Great. So hi guys. We have Kieran from Hong Kong, Gever. We have Lara from Sydney, Angela from Mexico, Mary from China. Hi, Mary.
Oh,
We
my
have
goodness.
Adam from Hong Kong. Hi, Adam. Darla from Arizona, Amelia from Singapore. Amazing. So it's a very like mixed global group. Hi, welcome everyone. And thanks a lot for making time. It's pretty early here in India. So thanks to those who are waking up. Thanks to those of you who are staying up to do it. Great. If we can go to the next slide, please.
Whoops.
Great. So the Learning Jam has been organized by Toddle. Toddle is your one-stop shop for all your teaching and learning needs, both in the IBPYP as well as the IBMYP. And with Toddle, you can plan collaboratively, create authentic assessments, document learning journeys, streamline IB evaluation, and engage families all from one intuitive platform. And if you can go to the next slide, Gever. So having, and if you can click again, having, being educators ourselves, we do deeply value lifelong learning, and we're committed to providing you with opportunities to foster that, be it with the Inquiry Educator Summit or through actually putting together really high quality blogs and resources for you on Toddle Learn. We've also created Toddle community for teachers in the IBPYP to connect and share teaching and learning resources with each other. The Learning Jam is also a community event much like this that we have organized to support you with your lifelong learning. And 2020 was all about adapting to the change that COVID-19 brought with it. We hope that 2021 is really just a chance for us to take learning to the next level and bring engagement and fun back to the classroom, be it virtual or physical. So we're really excited to kick things off with Gever today. Before we begin, I want to share some quick housekeeping points. If we can go to the next slide, please. As most of you know, in this webinar, Gever can't hear you, so please type your questions in the Q&A and type your chats in the chat box. When you're typing into the chat box, please make sure to click on reply to panelists and attendees, so that way everybody can see what you're saying. We won't be using the raise your hand feature, so if you have anything to share, please use the chat box and I will be your moderator sharing that with Gever. And this webinar has been developed independently and is not endorsed by the IB. And we also really thank our speakers like Gever who are sharing their learnings fully pro bono at the Learning Jam. Before we begin, I also want to take a quick minute to say thanks to our active participants who are on the call today. So if you can actually just take a few quick seconds to introduce yourself before we go ahead. We can start with Lou.
Hi, I'm Lou Gerlach. I'm an IB coordinator in Houston, Texas. Welcome.
Hi, Lou. Chad, would you like to go next?
Hi, I'm Chad Hyatt. I'm an instructional coach from Indianapolis.
Hi, Chad. Bodo.
Hi, everyone. I'm Bodo Heiliger. I'm the head of elementary at the International School in Portland, Oregon. Nice to see your chat.
Hi, Bodo. And Purti.
Yeah, good morning. My name is Purti Singh, and good morning again from Mumbai, India, to all of you. And welcome, and let's hope that you enjoy this session. It's going to be full of fun and hands-on.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks, guys. Thanks to everyone. Gever, if we can go to the next slide, please. Don't forget to get social, guys. So please share your learnings on social media using the hashtag Toddle Learning Jam. And you can tag Toddle across our social media platforms as well as you do that. So without any further ado, Gever, it's over to you. Cool. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you to Toddle and to Shadra for having me. And it's just a tremendous pleasure to be here with everyone to share some new work and some ideas from our school, Tinkering School, and with Brightworks. I'm Gever Tulley, the founder of the summer camp Tinkering School, the K through 12 Brightworks, and author of the book, 50 Dangerous Things You Should Let Your Children Do. Without further ado, let's get started. I'd like to ask you a favor. It's very simple. Just put your hand up and raise that finger. I'd like you to reach out now and to touch someone or something just with that finger. And as you touch that thing, there's an amazing thing happening inside your head. And if we could look in there, what we would see is that the parts of your brain that are associated with your finger and the object or person and the concept of touching, this idea of touching, is represented as a locus, as an area in your brain. If we looked, these would all be active, lit up with activity. It's almost as if the sentence, "I am touching the duck," is written there. It's almost that clear. Now, step 3. If you have a stick or a pen or even a phone nearby, I want you to do the same activity, to reach out and touch that thing or person with the stick. Just like that. You just reach out and touch it. I see I've got my helpers here. Thank you, Aaron. I see that. Bodo. Thank you, Shadra. What is most remarkable about this simple exercise is that if we look into your brain again, we see the very same sentence lighting up. It says, "I am touching the duck." And in a quiet voice, not nearly as loud, not nearly as important to your brain, it says, "with a stick." But the primary activation is, "I am touching the duck." We don't make a strong distinction between touching something with our finger or our hand and touching it with a tool. Your brain is so amazing. If we were to talk to someone whose job it is, a professional, whose job it is to operate this heavy piece of equipment, and stop them in the middle of working and ask them, "What are you doing?" They would say, "I'm digging a hole," or "I'm pouring this load of concrete on the 10th floor." They rarely mention the machine. The same way that we rarely say, I'm using my hands to wash these vegetables. We say, I'm washing vegetables. The machine or the tool that we're holding becomes such a comfortable and integrated part of ourselves that the line between self and tool is blurred. A child with a knife is carving a piece of wood, and they are not thinking, I am using a knife held at this angle to carve this piece of wood. The knife has become an extension of the child, and they are expressing themselves through this interaction with the wood. They are saying, I am carving a stick. Okay, here's the next one for step number 4 of our little experiment together. I want you to take your 2 sticks or objects or whatever they are and try to use them to pick something up. We're just going to do this for about 30 seconds. And I've just made for myself this little challenge with the ping pong ball. And I am going to try to pick them up just with the sticks. And I've almost got it. Almost. I've never tried to do this in front of such an audience. Yay, okay. Thank you for that. What I find when I do this little exercise with kids is that they rarely complain that it's too hard to do. They seem to be perfectly happy to try the experiment. And then as they try the experiment, they lose track of everything else. And they just interact with the object in the stick. And what I notice is that in just the course of about 60 seconds, they will try 5 or 6 different things, each thing harder than the last. They're asking themselves, what can I try next? What would be harder than this? These are really good questions. This self-challenging behavior, when we start to use our hands to solve problems, is natural. We're constantly pushing our boundaries in that zone of proximal development. So with that in mind, I want to tell you about a life-changing experience of my own. Back in 2005, through a kind of interesting series of accidents, I ended up starting a summer camp right here at my home. I had 8 children come to my house, sleep in my guest bedroom, and we spent a week together just building, just doing things we could do with our hands. On the very first day, we started small by building a bridge from my studio to a tree about 6 meters away. We developed the plan through experimentation, holding the materials together, trying to visualize it, and then ended up building the whole structure, the 8 children, the 2 adults that were there, in just a few hours. We built this enormous bridge. And then in what became a tradition, we put everyone on it to see how strong it was. In fact, we put the entire staff up there and a few bags of concrete. It was incredibly strong. Well, what were we going to do next? The kids and I talked about it, and we decided we would build a roller coaster. Kids ranging in age from 7 to 12 years old. Some days we worked 10 hours a day. It was the most exhausting, hard fun that any of us had ever had. But by the end of the week, we built a roller coaster with 40 meters of track.
3, 2, 1, go!
May well be. That may have been the most dangerous roller coaster in all of California. Well, this set us on a pattern of paying attention to the kinds of challenges that the kids would take on for themselves. And when one of the young children the next year found an empty cardboard box and started shaping it into a boat, I told him, I said, if you can finish that boat by Friday, we'll take it out and put it in the shark-infested waters of California. You can imagine how nervous he was as he first paddled away from shore in this cardboard boat. Similarly, when we were driving home from a shopping trip to get some extra supplies, and we discovered that while we were gone, someone had dumped lawn care equipment at the end of my road, just broken machinery. The kids jumped out of the car and started looking through it, and they held up a few motors and they were like, could we get these to work? Well, that became the basis of the most dangerous motorcycle in California. And in every one of these projects, we started with an idea and a set of materials that were probably completely inappropriate. And none of us on the staff, none of the students had ever done the projects before. None of us knew if it was going to work or not. Well, that turned out to be kind of a secret of a new kind of engagement, was to try something that had never been done before. 22 kilometers of abandoned railway became the perfect place to make sail-powered trains. When we moved the camp to a nearby ranch, there was this big grassy hill. The kids that very first year said, we should build a giant airplane. It took 2 days to design and build the first iteration. And it took 3 days of testing and crashing. Right here, we see one of the students trying, instead of explaining her idea for fixing the airplane, she couldn't put it in words. She sketched it out with string. They turned it into construction, crashed it a few more times, and then on the 5th day, the last day of camp, they got it to fly. Through this physical exploration of what it means to make something big that flies, the students developed a much deeper understanding of the physics of flight. They literally had their hands on an aircraft, changing its shape, refining the design until it worked. We had, without really meaning to, developed a framework that reliably created these memorable learning experiences. And it all started with making sure that every project was something realizable, something tangible. But it doesn't have to be a big flashy airplane. We've seen the same kinds of developing understandings in simple experiments with marbles. Hey. Those kinds of experiments are teaching the students through direct experience concepts like reproducibility, chaos, the understanding that a small change in start condition can lead to a very different outcome. What we rely on is that children are so good at extending themselves and their sense of self through their hands, we emphasize the use of tools. We try to make projects. We try to frame learning in terms of expressing those ideas physically. They learn how to use the tools safely from our staff, and then learn how to solve problems by building solutions with the tools. It doesn't seem to matter exactly which tools we have. We've even done whole camps with just sticks and string. And presented with these real problems, which I define as problems without known solutions, we see the most engagement and diversity of solutions when the students can put their hands on the problem and explore it physically. We see another amazing transformation in their understanding when they're in the design process and start to sketch things physically through rapid prototyping. We call these physical diagrams. They're quick, they're temporary, they're very low stakes. There's not a lot of emotional commitment to this current solution. They allow them to think through the problem, to refine their spatial understanding of the relationships, to understand the physics that are involved in the solution they're trying to build. Often in paper diagrams, we see misunderstandings of spatial relationships, relative scales of things, and the possible forces they might encounter. One of my favorite examples is this plan for building a rocket. And this rocket is going to go to Mars. And of course, it has room for some space gear, some food and water, and some storage compartment. And when I asked the student, what is this up at the front? He says, oh, that's where the pilot sits, and that's the control system. And I said, well, what's in the next compartment behind it? And he said, oh, that's a basket of fruit. And you can see in the diagram this kind of misunderstanding of the relative scales of things. And so as he first began to build the rocket, it had a very small compartment for the pilot. Well, pre-visualizing through physical diagrams made with actual materials allow the student to experience and understand the problem more fully. And paper diagrams made after the physical diagram reflect that understanding and often show a huge refinement in their understanding. I want to tell you a story that I've told before, but I love this story. And I also think there's something magical about story as a framing for learning. We often use narrative framework to engage the students with a new and interesting problem, more challenging than they might have taken on. If you look back at the camp, you see that the big projects themselves are like a mythic quest. There's a story that starts with, we don't have the right materials and we don't have enough time, but let's build a boat. And we undertake this enormous challenge together. Well, this is a story about a lesson I learned on my own epic quest. And it starts one day with a phone call from this amazing woman. This is Gever Tulley. She's the director of SETI, the space organization that is in the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. And she's this amazing scientist. She was a friend of Carl Sagan's. And she called me up and she was asking me to participate in their annual science celebration. And she asked me, could I design a kit to teach a fundamental science concept? And I had to tell her no, I don't do kits. I'm 4 or 5 years into tinkering school at this point in a process that's just showing us over and over again how you don't need a perfect plan, much less a kit. But she was so kind, and she called me 3 more times, and I said yes. And we settled on potential energy. And I suggested we would make these potential energy vehicles. And I built a couple of prototypes. This is a very early one, and it's just a little car powered by a weight that's falling. So the string is wound around the axle of the car as you back it up, and it lifts that weight. And then when you let go, the weight starts to fall and the car rolls forward. And it's inherently delightful, but not the kind of challenge that I was used to working with kids on, and certainly not the kind of thing where I wanted to just give them a solution. So I wrote some instructions that were inspired by IKEA, hoping that a good puzzle would serve as a way to engage. And along with it was a script that the instructor would follow as they read, as the experiment unfolded. And it includes this moment where the students put this weight on the table and they knock it off onto the ground, and it makes a big loud noise. And you reach down and it says, pay attention, because the energy you're using to lift this back up onto the table is stored in that hex nut. And when you knock it off the table, it releases that energy. It's a classic demonstration of potential energy. Let me just say that the kits were terrible. It was almost a complete failure. But there was this one shining moment that made the whole experiment worthwhile. And in the second batch of kids I was working with, this one girl, she couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 years old. She sat there with the hex nut and she was lifting it up to the edge of the table and tipping it off into the palm of her hand. The other kids are busy assembling and following the instructions so carefully. And I asked her if she was okay. And she said, yes, I'm just trying to figure this out. So I let her be, and I turned back to the other kids who are struggling with these terrible kits. And when I get back to her and I turn to her, she's just lifting the hex nut up and down out of the palm of her hand. And I say, how's it going? And she says, I don't think, look me straight in the eye, she says, I don't think the energy is stored in the hex nut. And I said, well, where do you think it's being stored? Well, she pauses for a second and she says, I think, she's like converting this understanding into words she can use to explain to this adult. She says, I think that gravity is like a stretchy rubber band. And when I pull this up, the rubber band is getting stretched. Like, here's a 7-year-old struggling with a concept that perplexed Isaac Newton. And I say, well, what happens if the rubber band breaks? And she says, I suppose the nut would just float away. This is a perfect explanation of the physics using the analogy that she's built. Well, I tried to impose a script on the kit-based experience that made no accommodation of her individual experience, her narrative, her personal story. But she had autonomy, took the time to explore this fundamental idea, making her own discovery and writing her own much more compelling story. She got so much more out of the experience than the kids who actually built the kits. And that led me to this thought. We should stop thinking of education as something that we do to people and start imagining them as voracious, self-directed learners, starving for learning. Well, a few years go by, and I'm at tinkering school one night. We're in the overnight camp, and a camper comes up and she asks this question. She says, I've never worked this hard in my life. Why can't school be more like this? I wondered why too, and a year or so later, I started Brightworks. Inspired by the work done in collaboration with the kids at the camp, we imagined a place where the student was as invested as the staff and where engagement was our metric of success. Our school offers children a complete education from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. We emphasize hands-on and experiential learning. We do a lot of writing, it's not all building. We consider that kind of creative, constructive work all to be a form of hands-on learning. There are no textbooks, there are no tests. Inspired by the narrative experience of the hero's journey at tinkering school, we developed a framework we call the ARC, and deliberately emphasized the idea that a student is independent and curious, the hero of their own epic story. One of my favorite stories of life at Brightworks is when we were studying weather, and a group of students decided they wanted to see, could they collect their own data about the weather in California? And instead of putting up a weather vane or something like that, they decided, could we send up a weather balloon? And they started researching it on the internet, and they found like lots of people have done this. So they decided to build a weather balloon, pack it with some instruments that had been donated, and see if they could gather their own data about the weather.
Outside the square.
The helium. I guess. Can do one more. 3, 2, 1.
Well, this balloon went up about 23,000 meters and took these pictures from the edge of the atmosphere. Through a remarkable piece of luck, the camera caught a picture of the parachute as it was falling and showed us that the atmosphere was so thin that the fabric wasn't even ruffling. It had to fall another few thousand feet, another 10,000 feet before it opened. And in their analysis of the data, they discovered that there were certain moments where the balloon was traveling horizontally at an incredible rate of speed, 82.5 miles per hour, about 120 kph. And when we found it on the other side of California in a field at almost dark, it was this incredible sense of jubilation. They will remember this moment forever. What I think is so interesting is that, again, the projects don't have to be enormous and cinematic in their scope. They can be as simple as building a chair. And the lesson here, I think, is that you don't know what you don't know until you try to make it. These kids walked into school on the first day of school, and there were no chairs in the classroom. And Mackenzie, their teacher, told them that the chairs had been somehow mysteriously disappeared, and they would have to make their own chairs. And the kids thought, how hard can it be? It's just a seat and some legs, right? And they built these chairs in just a few, like just about an hour of work. Some of them broke before they got them back to the classroom. And you won't be surprised to hear that they completely fell apart over the course of a few days. No one's heart was broken by their chair coming apart because they had only put that few moments of effort into making the first iteration. And that is the key to the first iteration in hands-on learning. You have to have a low investment emotionally, in the amount of time, in the amount of effort and resources, so that no one feels like that first iteration is precious, because it's going to break, it's going to fail. We need that first iteration to tell us what we don't know. They did some tests. They learned that the long legs of the chair had a tendency to bend off the bottoms of the seat, and they learned about the notion of a lever arm and how longer lever arms have more force on them. And they understood that they needed to put in some crossbars, and you can see they're updating and editing their plans. And they started to build new chairs, and we see this prominence of crossbars all over the place. They got their chairs working, and they were stronger, and they lasted longer. And in fact, they lasted long enough for them to discover that a strong chair is not necessarily a comfortable chair. And they started to learn about the ergonomics of the human body, what we need to sit in. And they looked at the chairs around their house, and they discovered that the chairs in their houses were made differently. So they headed out into the world to meet a furniture maker. And when, as a group, they talked about new kind of way of putting wood together to create joints that would be easy on the hands. They didn't have sharp edges showing. And they came back to the school, and they started planning with new designs, new level of precision, new ideas learned from this master furniture maker. And they start putting their chairs together. And this takes them almost a whole week of stages of gluing and drying and assembly. And when they get to the end, the change between their earliest iteration and their last iteration shows us that these young children are capable of making amazing pieces of furniture grade furniture, a high quality furniture. The podcaster Ira Glass, one of the inspirations of many of the staff at our school, and one of my personal heroes, talks famously about the gap between the idea that you have and the thing that you are trying to make. And he says in one of his essays, it is only by going through a volume of work that you will close the gap and your work will be as good as your ambitions. And what we see here is Ben with his first chair and his last chair and how amazing that work is. Well, we discover early on that projects that combine imagination, science, STEM topics, and hard work have the same transformational effect on adults when they're learning new things if we can make them tangible. In our workshops, when we're trying to teach how to bring project-based learning into the classroom, we have to make projects ourselves as adults. We can't just talk about it. We have to experience it firsthand. Our school is an experiment. And because our students get into the same colleges that students from more traditional schools go to, it shows that education does not have to be defined by how many hours of homework we do. When we were kids, we spent so much time learning those topics, studying those books. When we test people on those same subjects they learned early in school, what they remember are the experiences and not the details of what they learned. What if those experiences were framing the learning? Well, when we imagine only what can go wrong, we forget all of the good that can come when children put their hands on the problem and see the world as full of possibilities. The future of education depends on us, the educators, the parents, and the society, learning to trust children more, starting to put them in the driver's seat of their own educations, starting to believe in them as voracious, self-directed learners. I say, let us be brave. If children are only allowed to learn from books, they quickly learn to stop being creative. If they are trapped at their desks, they will never learn how to engage with the world. When the only answers we can accept are the ones on the test, they will stop looking for new solutions. So let's give them time, enough to explore and understand an idea through direct interaction. Autonomy, let's trust them enough to learn from their experiences. And the respect they deserve as the ones who will build the future. Thank you so much for this time, a chance to share with you some of the ideas that we've been working on at Brightworks and Tinkering School. I'd like to open up the Q&A for questions and leave this slide up here because we're experiencing COVID along with all the rest of you. And our response has been to create some amazing online tinkering camps that are recreating some of these hands-on learning experiences. We offer an amazing array of experiential learning opportunities for kids at home. Go to tinkeringschool.com and you'll find our Motors camp, our digital camp, and our Mars camp, where kids can experience what it's like to operate rovers on Mars through their laptops from home. It's incredible. The Motors Camp is a tinkering camp where they create new inventions. The digital camp introduces them to the ideas of programming using simple tools. We'll send you the kit anywhere in the world. And now I'd like to invite my host back, Shadra, and open up for Q&A.
Thank you, Gever. And I had zero doubts that this session would be, I had zero doubts about it being inspiring. And I think the chat was a testament to that. A lot of people who kind of found a lot of parallels when you spoke about the specific examples that you shared. And also towards the end where you kind of spoke about failure through the example of the chairs. I think that struck a chord with educators as well, because failure is something that we think about preparing our students for on an everyday basis. So I have a few different questions, Gever, some of them a little in the weeds and some of them a little bigger picture. So I'm going to start with the things that are actually a little in the weeds, right? So coming to the exact example of the chair, Uma Sharma asked, how much time did it actually take them to go through that iterative process? And for things like this, is it a part of a theme of learning that they're doing at a period of time at school, or is it an independent project that they work on? Can you give some more context about how you organize that?
Yeah. So one thing to understand about Brightworks is it's a school in California. And because of the laws of California, private school is not required to conform to any legal definition of a school. And in fact, all forms of education are supported. And so we're able to do something that a lot of schools can't, which is that the projects are the learning, are the school. And so we're either exploring new ideas, narratively, through research, through experience, through going out and meeting with experts, or we're doing projects that help us understand a new concept. I mean, yes, sometimes we're just sitting down with a piece of paper and doing some math, trying to understand something. But because of the context that we're in, we're able to make this the center of learning. Now, in IB schools and in more typical schools around the world, there are curriculum goals, there are national tests that have to be adhered to, laws about this. And the project-based learning gets relegated to either after-school programming or one period a week or one period a day. And these can all work. Those are all worth doing, just to be clear. It doesn't have to be all or nothing like Brightworks, but in that context, we find the more often we can visit the project, the more momentum the project has. So at our school, when Mackenzie did that project around the chairs, the first chairs was just one afternoon, about 2.5 hours of like going to the shop, doing the quick build, bringing the chairs back. Then as the chairs broke, there were conversations about chairs, and there were actual lessons kind of built around understanding what the chair is trying to do and how it's trying to hold your weight up, and talking about gravity and all of the things, all the STEM topics you might think about connecting to that. The next iteration of the chairs was a few afternoons. They couldn't build it in just 2 hours. So it was maybe 3 afternoons to build the next generation. Then the third generation, the furniture chairs, that, like I said, was a whole week of small increments of work, because they kept gluing things together and then having to wait overnight for things to dry. So you can imagine, though, it was about 3 weeks of visiting chairs on a regular basis, but not all day. Yeah.
Got it. And Gever, a few other questions in this area, right? In terms of, how is it that you do teach like just subject matter material within a very creative curriculum like this? And another connected question is when they're thinking of promoting the language arts through tinkering, Do you have any thoughts and like just like from your experience on like how you do that with your students?
Yeah. So I think, gosh, I don't have one here. Here we go. This is my notebook, but
Okay.
I think when you hold up a book, what you're looking at is something that was carefully constructed by the author,
Yes.
right? I mean, obviously there was a publisher and a printing press and all of that involved, but it started with a creative impulse and an idea about something they wanted to communicate. And that process of constructing a piece of writing,
Yeah.
pardon me, that process of constructing a piece of writing is not unlike the tinkering process of iterating, getting your hands on the shape of what it is, metaphorically this time, and going through that process of writing and refining and throwing things out and starting over. But then, you find yourself on a path and you realize like, this is the storyline that's going to take me to the end of the book, or this way of describing this research is going to make people who read this understand it. And that's very similar, we find, to all of the project processes we use. And when we approach it that way, the failure in writing is the frustration we feel when someone else reads it and they don't understand what we meant. And if we can put that failure on the table and look at, metaphorically, if we can look at why that chair broke and see the screw coming out of the seat, in the writing circumstance, we can put that writing up and look at how did this thing that you put so much effort into still not convey that idea. And so we become our own self-reflective researchers. Like, I tried saying it this way and it didn't work. Oh, I need to say it in a different way. Or it could be as simple as I dropped a few words. I was typing so fast or writing so fast, I didn't get all the words in. And by putting it up there for us to look at together, we can see that. Yeah.
And it almost makes me think of how, like, just the very definition of tinkering, whenever the word said, I don't know, personally, I always think of a maker space. I think of people doing something with their hands, which is very much correct. But I think
Yeah.
you have given some food for thought in terms of tinkering can also just very much be a process that you can go through no matter what you're doing. Doesn't need to be essentially with
Yeah.
creating a physical, like productive material.
Completely.
Yeah. I personally love this question from Wendy White. I think it's something that, Wendy White, sorry, something that a lot of people might be wondering. So she asks, what would you suggest for a teacher who's actually very interested in starting out to think, like, equipping their child in like tinkering and doing more hands-on learning in the classroom, but they don't really have any personal experience themselves? Where do they begin?
Yeah. So I always say that, we can do tinkering anywhere with no tools, with nothing, because we're going to collaborate with the child. We always think of teacher as someone who sits at the front of the classroom and tells everyone what to do. But if we're working on something new and we don't know anything about it, it presents a wonderful opportunity for the students to see how we learn, for us to model that learning. So I often tell people, if you're going to start with cardboard and tape. There are amazing things you can build with cardboard that have incredible charm to them. They can be highly engineered. They can be completely silly. They present an opportunity to introduce the ideas of building with precision, which is often a challenge for kids when they're first getting into constructing. And all you need is some recycled cardboard and tape, a few empty cardboard boxes, and we can start to build structures. We've built chairs out of cardboard, things that you could stand on, things that you could sit on. We've built incredible marble runs through a classroom that are just cardboard stuck to the walls and chairs and everything. And so that's where I like to start. is the teacher is showing how they learn by introducing themselves and the students at the same time to the new experience, to the new tool, to the new material. All of that can happen in real time, live with the students.
And I think that also gave answers to a certain extent, questions that are coming up about how to do this within the confines of a structured curriculum or like traditional K-12 schooling. Within that, how do you do it? I think this sort of answers that. Would you agree?
Yes, I agree. I think that the traditional curriculum often presents us with thousands of opportunities to sort of take a quick deep dive into some phenomenon or concept that we've just read in the textbook, pausing for even 10 minutes to say, like, what's a way that we could, how can we try this? And everybody's looking around the classroom, you know, like, grab that ruler and that roll of tape and, oh, we need the bell, you know.
Yeah.
and I always say, like, history is best understood by acting it out, right? If we're looking at some very traditional topic like history, how much better do we understand that moment in time if we embody that character, right? You know, I mean, obviously there's more curriculum to cover than we could act out completely, but just pick a few moments and let's just play act to that moment.
Yeah. And you kind of briefly touched upon this, you know, and you also have this up here, which says online tinkering camps are open at the tinkering school. A lot of us are curious. So Lucero Rodriguez, for example, can you tell us a little bit about your experience of adapting to an online environment, and like, how has that been for the children? How has that been for the teachers? What have you done differently? And any tips that, you know, you can share with teachers who are still working remotely?
Yeah, and I'll just ask my friend Aaron to put the link in. We're doing once a month workshops over Zoom for educators to talk through in a more direct manner these kinds of questions.
That's amazing.
So every month we pick a new topic, and they're really nice. They're really fun. You know, I think we're all struggling to engage the student remotely, right? And we end up trying things and they don't quite work. And I think the very best advice is the advice that I got, pardon me, the advice that I got about 2 months into COVID, where a teacher friend of mine was talking to me, and she said, you know, we have to embrace the fact that the virus is changing everything. And that means that we have to reset our expectations about our own lives, our own, you know, what we do for a living, how we teach, how kids learn. The very best thing we can do is be there for each other, offer what we can, and respect the child when they can't engage. We don't know how complicated life is on the other side of the screen because we're not there with them. And I thought that was wonderful. She said, you know, we just need to give ourselves permission to not expect the same thing we had when we were right there with them. Because we spent our lives getting better at teaching in person, and then having to extend ourselves through this tiny little window and expect that student to sit there for 6 hours a day and stay fully focused the way they did when they were in person. We just took away all of the most engaging parts of school, the social structure, the shared energy of diving into a new problem or sharing a discovery, the energy that goes back and forth between the teacher and the student, the experience, the tactile experience of being at school. And so, you know, one of the things I always work on is failure is progress. You know, that thing you tried was wonderful, even if it didn't work exactly how you thought it was going to. As a teacher, you're in a constantly creative dilemma of how to convey this information through the screen. Keep trying. Like, every experiment you do is helping you as a teacher. It's going to pay off in the classroom later when we're back together, and it's helping the student. All those different things you're trying are giving them different perspectives to learn from. You know, you tried it one day and it didn't work, and you tried the very same topic the next day using sticks and a ping pong ball, and for some reason it did. You know, or for that group of students it did, and for this group of students it didn't. You know, I just really want to give every teacher in the world permission to try and fail, and to try again, you know, joyfully, to really think about what works and what doesn't, and to get yourself off of that expectation that your every day is going to be better and better and better, because the children are experiencing something that has a cumulative effect of saturation. They're getting tired of being in Zoom. They're getting tired of being online. And so your job is getting more complicated, not easier. And I think you have my respect as a teacher, whoever you are and wherever you are, if you just get up every day and try. That's a beautiful thing you're doing.
Gever, thank you so much. I think there are a few more questions here as well, a little bit about, you know, how to make this happen for the early years, a few more around how can I do this within the traditional schooling environment. I think you've briefly touched upon many of I think the overall idea you've very well encapsulated in this like very short time that we gave you. When we started thinking about who could be the first opening keynoter at the Learning Jam, we had no doubts that you would be amazing, just because of all the authentic work and the passion that you bring to this field. So thank you so much. And to the audience, I really urge you to sort of take a look at Tinkering School. Please check out their work. And as Gever said, Aaron, I'm guessing you've had a chance to pop the link in, so you can take a look at that as well. For any further questions, you know, feel free to reach out to us at Toddle and also Gever. But thank you so much, Gever, for your time. And thanks to your whole team as well for the wonderful work that you all do. To the audience joining us today, our next session is going to begin in just a minute with Dr. Leena Bakshi from STEM for Real. So I would encourage you to hop onto that session and be a part of it. So thank you. Thanks again, Gever, and thanks to all the active participants who were with us using their chopsticks as well. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Gever.
Thank you all. Yeah.
Thank you, Gever. You were good.